Hey friends, tonight we begin with the dusty, sun-scorched roads of the 12th century Holy Land. This is a landscape of profound faith and profound danger, where the path to salvation is paved with hardship. So, before we get comfortable, take a moment to like and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy this kind of history, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself waking up not in your familiar bed, but on a scratchy wool blanket laid upon the hard-packed earth. The year is somewhere in the 1110s. The air, even before dawn, is thick with the promise of heat and carries the scent of dust, dried herbs, and the distant, subtle aroma of the sea. You are a pilgrim. You have walked for months, maybe even years, from your home in northern France, or perhaps a small village in the German lands, or a bustling Italian port. Your entire life has been a preparation for this. The local priest spoke of Jerusalem, the center of the world, the place where Christ walked, died, and was resurrected. To journey there, to touch the sacred stones and walk the Via Dolorosa, is to wash your soul clean. It is the ultimate act of devotion, a penance for a lifetime of small sins. You sit up, your joints aching with a familiar weariness. The journey has been long and arduous. You cross the Alps on foot, your leather-soled shoes wearing thin on the rocky paths. You took a ship from Genoa or Venice, a vessel crammed with so many other hopeful souls that there was scarcely room to breathe. The sea was a terrifying, unpredictable beast, and more than one of your fellow travelers succumbed to sickness, their bodies committed to the deep with a brief prayer. But you survived. You landed in the port of Jaffa, a chaotic, vibrant city teeming with strange sights and sounds. You saw men with skin darker than any you had ever seen, heard languages that twisted in the air like exotic birdsong, and smelled spices that made your head spin. Now, you are on the final leg of your journey, the road from Jaffa to Jerusalem. It is a distance of only 40 miles, a journey that might take a determined traveler 2 or 3 days. But it is the most dangerous part of your pilgrimage. The Crusader kingdom of Jerusalem, established after the bloody success of the First Crusade a couple of decades ago, is a precarious foothold in a hostile land. Its control is concentrated in fortified cities and castles, linked by roads that are anything but secure. You've heard the stories whispered around the campfires at night, tales that make the hairs on your arms stand up despite the warm air as the sun begins to rise, casting long, purple shadows across the landscape. You join the slow-moving river of humanity trickling along the path. You are not alone, of course. There are hundreds of others, stout merchants with their mules laden with goods, families with weary children, and even a few nobles with their small retinues, their armor glinting in the morning light. But there are not enough of them, not enough to deter the real danger. The road winds through rocky hills and narrow defile, perfect terrain for an ambush. Bedouin tribesmen, who have roamed these lands for centuries and see the Frankish newcomers as invaders, watch from the high ground. Brigands, loyal to no one but themselves, hide among the rocks, waiting for the vulnerable. You pull your simple cloak tighter around your shoulders, the ruffle a small comfort. You finger the few coins you have left, hidden deep within a leather pouch tied to your belt. They are meant for offerings at the holy sites, for a simple meal, for a bed at a hospice in the holy city. To lose them would be devastating, but your life is worth infinitely more. Every rustle in the thorny scrub that lines the road makes you jump. Every shadow seems to conceal a threat. The sun climbs higher, beating down relentlessly. Sweat trickles down your temples, carving clean paths through the grime on your face. Your water skin is already half empty, and the water within is lukewarm and tastes of leather. The landscape is beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. The hills are a palette of ochre, brown, and pale green, dotted with the silver gray of olive trees. But you can find little solace in the beauty. Fear is a constant companion, a bitter taste in the back of your throat. Yesterday, you passed a grim scene that is now seared into your memory. A small group of pilgrims, who had perhaps strayed too far from the main body of travelers, had been attacked. Their belongings were scattered, their bodies left by the side of the road. The local Christian garrison had come to bury them, but the image of their pale, still forms under the harsh sun is one you cannot shake. You see now that faith alone is not enough to protect you on this road. Piety is no shield against a brigand's sword. The lords of the kingdom of Jerusalem, men like King Baldwin II, are aware of the problem. They have too few soldiers to effectively patrol every mile of every road. Their knights are needed to garrison castles, to defend against the larger threats from the Fatimid Caliphate in Egypt or the Seljuk Turks to the north and east. The pilgrims, the very reason for the kingdom's existence, are left terrifyingly exposed. It is in this atmosphere of desperate faith and palpable fear that a new idea is beginning to take root. You hear it spoken of in hushed tones by a French knight you share your meager bread with one evening. He speaks of a countryman of his, a nobleman from Champagne named Hugues de Payens. These Hugues, and a handful of his companions, have seen the suffering of the pilgrims. They have witnessed the attacks, heard the cries of the desperate, and they believe they have a solution, a new calling from God. They propose not just to be soldiers, nor simply to be monks. They want to be both, a new kind of knighthood, dedicated not to feudal lords or personal glory, but to the protection of the weak, to safeguarding the roads to the holy city. They plan to swear vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, just like the monks in their monasteries back home. But their cloister will be the open road. Their prayers will be punctuated by the clash of steel. They will be the poor fellow soldiers of Christ. It's a radical, almost unthinkable idea. A monk's duty is to pray for the souls of the world, a knight's to fight for his Lord. To combine the two seems a strange, perhaps even unnatural, hybrid. But on this dangerous road, under this unforgiving sun, the idea doesn't seem so strange. It feels like a desperate prayer about to be answered. You finally arrive in Jerusalem. The city is everything you dreamed of and nothing like you imagined. From a distance, its golden stone walls seem to rise supernaturally from the rocky hills, glowing in the late afternoon sun. But as you pass through the Jaffa Gate, jostled by the crowd, the city reveals itself as a place of intense, chaotic life. The narrow streets are a labyrinth of sound and smell. Merchants hawk their wares in a dozen languages. The scent of roasting meat, incense, and unwashed bodies hangs heavy in the air, and the sheer press of humanity is overwhelming after the lonely emptiness of the road. You find your way to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, the holiest site in Christendom, and for a moment, all the weariness and fear of your journey melts away in a wave of profound spiritual awe. You have made it. You are here at the center of the world. Over the next few days, as you explore the city, you keep hearing more about this small band of knights led by Hugues de Payens. The idea, which seemed so novel on the road, is now taking formal shape. It is the year of our Lord 1119, or perhaps 1120. The exact date is a little fuzzy, as record-keeping is not always the highest priority in these tumultuous times. You find yourself drawn by curiosity to a gathering near the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Crusaders, upon conquering the city, believed this magnificent structure, with its sprawling courtyards and impressive dome, was the very Temple of Solomon from the Old Testament. The historical accuracy of this claim is, let's say, highly debatable, but to the Franks, it is a certainty. They call it the Templum Solomonis, and it is a place of immense significance. The King of Jerusalem, Baldwin II, has taken up residence in one part of the complex, but he has granted another wing to this fledgling brotherhood for their quarters. You stand at a respectful distance in the courtyard, the stones beneath your worn shoes still warm from the day's sun. There are only 9 of them. It's a surprisingly small number, almost comically so, given the scale of their ambition. You see Hugues de Payens, a man of middle years, his face weathered by the eastern sun, his expression one of grim determination. With him is his kinsman, Godfrey de Saint-Omer, and 7 other French knights whose names are now etched into history: Payen de Montdidier, Archambaud de Saint-Aignan, André de Montbard, Geoffrey Bisset, and 2 men recorded only as Rossal and Gondomar. The 9th name is a matter of some historical debate, a small mystery right at the very beginning of their story. These men stand before Warmund of Picigny, the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem. He is the highest religious authority in the Crusader kingdom, and it is to him they will swear their vows. There is no grand ceremony, no soaring music, no crowds of adoring nobles. It is a simple, austere affair, conducted in the open air as dusk begins to settle over the city. The knights have shed their heavy armor. They are dressed in simple tunics, their swords still at their belts, a visible sign of their dual nature. One by one, they kneel before the patriarch, placing their hands in his, a traditional act of feudal homage. But they are not swearing fealty to a king or a lord who will grant them lands and wealth. They are swearing their lives to God. They take the 3 traditional monastic vows: poverty, chastity, and obedience. You watch as they speak the ancient words, their voices earnest and clear in the cooling air. They vow to own no personal property, to live a celibate life, and to obey their master and the rule of their order unto death. It is a profound commitment, a complete surrender of the self, of the very things, wealth, family, and personal will, that define a knight's life back in Europe. Their new name reflects this commitment: the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. It's a mouthful, and soon enough, everyone will simply call them the Templars. Their poverty is not just a vow, it is their reality. Chroniclers, like the Archbishop William of Tyre writing a few decades later, would emphasize this initial destitution. He wrote that for their first 9 years, they were so poor that 2 knights had to share a single horse. This image, 2 mail-clad warriors seated one behind the other on a lone steed, would become their most famous symbol, immortalized on their seal. It was a potent emblem of their humility and their commitment to brotherhood. Now, whether this was literally true or a clever bit of later branding to emphasize their pious origins is a question historians gently debate. Sharing a war horse, a valuable and highly trained animal, would be militarily impractical. But as a symbol, it was perfect. It spoke volumes about their rejection of worldly glory. King Baldwin and the patriarch give them their blessing and their charge to keep the roads and highways safe from the menace of robbers and attackers, with particular concern for the protection of pilgrims. Their new home, the wing of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, is both a practical headquarters and a place of immense symbolic power. They are living, quite literally, atop the ruins of Solomon's Temple. For medieval Christians, this connection was electrifying. They were the new guardians of the temple, warrior monks defending the heart of their faith. The stables of the mosque, which the Crusaders believed were the original stables of King Solomon, were said to be vast enough to hold thousands of horses. It was here that the Templars would stable their mounts, another link to the storied, almost mythical past. In these early years, their life is one of harsh simplicity. You can imagine them rising before dawn for matins, their prayers echoing in the stone halls that once heard the call of the muezzin. Their days would be a cycle of prayer, patrolling the dangerous roads you yourself just traveled and training. They would eat their meals in silence, listening to a reading from scripture, as was the monastic tradition. Their diet would be plain, their comforts few. They accepted donations of food, old clothes, and discarded equipment. They were, in essence, a holy militia dependent on the charity of the very people they were sworn to protect. They did not even have a distinctive uniform yet. They wore whatever secular clothing they possessed or were given. Their only mark of distinction, perhaps a growing reputation for piety and courage. It's a humble, almost invisible beginning for an organization that would one day become one of the most powerful and wealthy institutions in the Western world. But standing here, in the twilight of Jerusalem, watching these 9 earnest men begin their sacred work, you would have no inkling of the vast empire of faith and finance they were about to build. You would only see a small, hopeful light against a great and menacing darkness. 9 years have passed. The calendar now reads 11/29. You are no longer in the sun-drenched, dusty streets of Jerusalem. Instead, you find yourself in the heart of winter in Champagne, France. A damp chill seeps through the thick stone walls of the cathedral in Troyes, a cold that even the roaring fires in the hearths and the light of 100 beeswax candles cannot fully dispel. The air is heavy with the scent of old stone, melting wax, and the faint, sweet smell of incense clinging to the heavy woolen robes of the men gathered here. You are a witness to one of the most important church gatherings of the age, the Council of Troyes. Archbishops, bishops, and powerful abbots are here, their faces illuminated by the flickering candlelight, their expressions a mixture of piety and shrewd political calculation. The papal legate, Cardinal Matthew of Albano, presides over the council, his presence a direct link to the authority of Pope Honorius II in Rome. At the center of all this ecclesiastical power stands a familiar figure, Hugues de Payens. He has traveled all the way from the Holy Land for this. He is no longer just the leader of a small, impoverished band of 9 knights. His brotherhood has grown, their reputation for courage and discipline spreading. But they lack one crucial thing: official sanction. They are still just a private association, a pious fraternity operating in a legal and religious gray area. To grow, to attract the noble-born recruits and the substantial donations they need, they must be recognized by the church as a legitimate religious order. This council is their moment of truth, and they have a powerful ally in their corner. A man whose influence is so immense that his support can make or break kings and popes alike. Bernard, the Cistercian abbot of Clairvaux. You watch as Hugues de Payens addresses the council. He speaks plainly, a soldier's directness in his voice. He describes the dangers faced by pilgrims, the constant struggle to hold the Holy Land, and the unique vocation of his warrior monks. He asks the assembled churchmen to grant his order a formal rule, a regula, to govern their lives. This is more than just a request for a handbook of regulations. A rule, like the famous rule of Saint Benedict that governed most monasteries, would be their constitution, their spiritual and practical guide. It would transform them from a well-meaning band of vigilantes into a permanent, recognized institution of the Catholic Church. The council agrees. They commissioned the great Bernard of Clairvaux himself, along with a scribe, to help draft the rule. You can imagine them working late into the night, the scratch of a quill on parchment the only sound in a cold scriptorium. The result is the Latin Rule of the Knights Templar, a document of 72 clauses that lays out every aspect of a Templar's life in meticulous detail. It is a fascinating blend of monastic piety and military pragmatism. You learn that a Templar's life is to be one of constant prayer. They are to attend all the canonical hours, from matins before dawn to compline after dusk. If their military duties prevent them from attending the chapel, They are to recite a specific number of Our Fathers instead. 13 for Matins, 7 for Vespers. Their life is to be communal. They are to eat together, sleep together in a common dormitory, and possess no private property. Even the letters they receive from home are to be read aloud in the presence of the master. The rule dictates their appearance with remarkable specificity. They are forbidden from having pointed shoes or excessively long lance pennants, seen as vanities of the secular world. Their hair must be cut short, so they can see clearly in front and behind. They are, however, to let their beards grow, a distinction that would set them apart from the mostly clean-shaven secular knights and give them a stern, patriarchal appearance. They are forbidden from hunting, except for lions, a clause that seems both incredibly specific and rather optimistic about the wildlife in Champagne, but which makes perfect sense for knights stationed in the Holy Land. They are not to associate with women, not even female relatives. Kissing a woman, even one's own mother or sister, is strictly forbidden. The rule is designed to strip away the knight's individual identity and forge him into a selfless component of a holy machine. One of the most significant decisions made here at Troyes is the granting of their distinctive habit. The Cistercians, Bernard's own order, wore undyed wool habits, so the Templar Knights are given a simple white mantle to be worn over their mail. This white is deeply symbolic. It represents the purity of their new life, a complete break from the dark life of a secular knight. In a world rich with heraldry and color, this stark white mantle would make them instantly recognizable, a brilliant, almost ghostly presence on the battlefield. The sergeants and other lower-ranking members of the order would wear black or brown mantles, creating a clear visual hierarchy. It is not until a couple of decades later, during the Second Crusade, that Pope Eugenius III will grant them the right to add the final iconic touch, a simple, blood-red cross, the Croix Petit, to be worn over the heart on their left side. This cross symbolized their willingness to shed their blood for Christ, their status as permanent crusaders. But the foundation, the white mantle of purity, is laid here in the chill of Troyes. As the council concludes, and Hugues de Payens prepares for his journey back to the Holy Land, he carries with him more than just a roll of parchment. He carries legitimacy. The poor fellow soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon are now a formal order of the Church, sanctioned by the Pope himself. Their mission has been blessed, their way of life codified. This is the moment the floodgates open. The approval of a man like Bernard of Clairvaux is the ultimate seal of approval. Young nobles from across Europe, fired by piety and a thirst for adventure, will now flock to join their ranks. Great lords will begin to shower them with donations of land, castles, and coins. From these humble, meticulously defined beginnings, an empire will be born. The rule, with its stern prohibitions on pointy shoes and its careful allocation of Our Fathers, has just created the most formidable fighting force in Christendom. The words written on the parchment in Troyes were a spark, but it would take a powerful wind to fan that spark into a flame that would sweep across Christendom. You are now about to witness the work of the man who was that wind, Bernard of Clairvaux. He is not a king or a pope, but in many ways, he is more powerful than either. He is an abbot, a theologian, a mystic, and the most influential man in Europe. His endorsement is the medieval equivalent of a global superpower's backing, and he is about to throw his entire spiritual and intellectual weight behind the fledgling Templar order. Shortly after the Council of Troyes, perhaps around the year 1130, Bernard takes up his quill once more. He is not drafting a rule this time, but a passionate work of propaganda, a theological justification for this strange new hybrid of monk and warrior. He titled it De Laudi Novi Militiae, in praise of the new knighthood, Imagine you are a young lord in a drafty castle in Anjou, or perhaps a student at the nascent university in Paris. A letter arrives, a scroll of fine parchment copied by a Cistercian monk. It is Bernard's treatise, and as it is read aloud in the great hall, a hush falls over the assembled company. Bernard's prose, even in translation, is electric. It is a brilliant piece of rhetoric that speaks directly to the anxieties and aspirations of the knightly class. He begins by painting a stark, unflattering portrait of the typical secular knight. You listen and perhaps shift uncomfortably in your seat, recognizing a bit of yourself or your peers in his description. He describes you as a man driven by vanity, pride, and greed. You wear silk on your horses, paint your shields, and wear elaborate, trailing armor not for protection, but for show. You fight not for God or for justice, but for petty squabbles over land, for personal honor, or for the sheer, bloody thrill of it. Bernard's words are sharp. He asks a devastating question. What is the spiritual outcome of this life of violence? If you kill another man in such a private war, you commit a mortal sin. If you are killed, you die in a state of sin and face damnation. It is a spiritual dead end, a life of homicide, not malicide. There is, in his view, no glory in it, only peril for your immortal soul. This was a message that would have resonated deeply. The feudal aristocracy was a warrior class, but it was also a deeply religious one, haunted by the fear of hell and the knowledge that their very profession was spiritually compromising. Then, having laid out this bleak picture, Bernard presents the solution: the Templar, the new knighthood. The Templar, he argues, is entirely different. He is a knight of Christ. When a Templar kills an enemy of the faith, it is not homicide. It is malicide, the killing of evil itself. He is an instrument of God's justice. And if a Templar is killed in battle, he does not die in sin, but as a blessed martyr, guaranteed a place in heaven. Rejoice, brave warrior, Bernard writes. If you live and conquer in the Lord, you will be covered in glory. But if you die, you will be united with him. Life is fruitful and victory is glorious, but a holy death is to be preferred. It is a stunning theological maneuver. He has taken the most spiritually dangerous profession in the medieval world and transformed it into the most certain path to salvation. He praises every aspect of their humble, disciplined life as laid out in the rule you saw drafted at Troyes. He contrasts their simple, unadorned appearance with the foppishness of secular knights. They shun checkers and dice, hating hunting, and take no pleasure in the absurd cruelty of falconry. Their hair is short, their bodies unwashed, their faces dusty, burnt by the sun, and their coat of mail. They are obedient to their master, live in community, and seek not personal glory but the glory of Christ. They are, in his words, gentler than lambs, yet fiercer than lions. They are the perfect fusion of the monk's humility and the soldier's courage. This treatise is copied and recopied, circulating throughout the courts and monasteries of Europe. It is a sensation for a second or third son of a noble family, with no land to inherit and few prospects beyond a life as a hired sword. Bernard's words offer an incredible new career path, one that promises adventure, purpose, and the salvation of your soul. The effect is immediate and profound. Hugues de Payens, armed with the new rule and Bernard's powerful endorsement, embarks on a grand recruitment tour. He travels through Champagne, Anjou, Normandy, and across the Channel to England and Scotland. Everywhere he goes, he is greeted not as the leader of a poor, obscure brotherhood, but as a living embodiment of this new, holy knighthood. He is showered with gifts. Nobles, great and small, donate vast tracts of land, farms, manors, forests, and mills. They give him money, horses, and weapons. King Henry I of England receives him with great honor and gives him a considerable sum of silver and gold. Fathers proudly offer up their sons to join the order. The trickle of support the Templars had received in their first decade becomes a torrent. They are granted lands across Europe, from Portugal to Hungary. These estates, which would come to be known as preceptories or commanderies, were not just gifts. They were the beginning of a massive logistical network. These European farms and manors would generate the wealth, the grain, the wine, the wool, the cash, that would fund the Templars' primary mission thousands of miles away in the Holy Land. A young man joining the order in England might never see Jerusalem, but the work he did managing a Templar sheep farm in the Cotswolds was directly contributing to the defense of the Crusader states. Bernard's blessing did more than just fill the Templars' ranks. It laid the financial and logistical foundations of their future empire. The poor fellow soldiers were, rather ironically, on the verge of becoming incredibly wealthy. And with that wealth would come a new role, one that Hugues de Payens and Bernard of Clairvaux could never have imagined. They were about to become the bankers of Christendom. The years have rolled on. It is now the middle of the 12th century, perhaps the 1150s. The Templar Order, born from such humble beginnings, is now a powerful and respected institution across Europe and the Holy Land. Their white mantles are a common sight, a symbol of piety and martial strength. But now, you are about to experience a side of the order that has less to do with swords and prayers and everything to do with something far more worldly: money. You are a landowner from the south of England, and you have decided to answer the call of the crusade. Or perhaps you are a wealthy wool merchant from Flanders, planning a long and complex trading venture to the eastern Mediterranean. Your problem is not one of faith or courage, but of simple logistics. How do you transport your wealth safely across 1,000 miles of dangerous territory? You cannot simply pack a cart full of silver coins. As you well remember from your own imagined pilgrimage, the roads are plagued by bandits. Every forest hides a potential ambush. Every mountain passes a new threat. Carrying a large sum of cash is like carrying a sign that says, "Please rob me." You could purchase goods in England and hope to sell them for a profit in the East. But that is a risky venture, subject to the whims of the market, shipwreck, and pirates. You need a way to move your purchasing power, not a chest of physical metal. This is a world without digital transfers, without checks, without any of the conveniences you take for granted. And it is in solving this very problem that the Knights Templar found a new and unexpectedly lucrative calling. You've heard that the Templars offer a solution. You saddle your horse and ride to the nearest Templar preceptory, a journey of a day or two. From a distance, it looks like a small castle. It is a fortified stone complex with a sturdy gatehouse, a chapel, and various agricultural buildings, all surrounded by a protective wall. It is a bastion of order and security in the countryside. You are greeted at the gate not by a fierce warrior in full mail, but by a sergeant brother, a practical, sober-looking man in a black or brown mantle. You are led not to an armory, but to what can only be described as an office. It is a clean, quiet room. A brother, a chaplain perhaps with the skills of a scribe, sits at a heavy wooden desk. The air smells of ink, parchment, and the subtle scent of beeswax from the seals they use. You state your business. You wish to deposit a substantial sum, let's say 100 marks of silver, to be withdrawn upon your arrival in the city of Acre in the Holy Land. The Templar scribe nods. The process is remarkably efficient. Your coins are brought forth, counted carefully, and their weight and purity perhaps checked by an assayer. The scribe then takes a fresh sheet of parchment. Using a complex cipher, a code known only to the brothers of the order, he writes out a letter of credit. The letter details the amount you have deposited, your name, and a description of you for identification. It is written in a way that would be meaningless to any bandit who might steal it. He might use specific phrases, references, or codes that correspond to a ledger and acre. The document is then folded, and a wax seal, bearing the famous image of two knights on one horse, is pressed onto it. The scribe hands you the letter. You hold this simple piece of parchment in your hand. It feels flimsy, almost absurdly so, compared to the heavy bag of silver it represents. Yet, this letter is now one of the most valuable things you own. You place it in a secure pouch and begin your long journey east. You travel with a lighter heart. You may still face dangers, but the loss of your entire fortune is no longer one of them. Months later, you arrive in the bustling, sun-drenched port of Acre. The city is a kaleidoscope of cultures, a vibrant hub of trade between East and West. You make your way through the crowded streets to the Templar compound, a massive fortress within the city walls. Here, the atmosphere is more martial. Knights in their white mantles stride purposefully through the courtyards. But you are again directed to an administrative office, remarkably similar to the one you left behind in England. You present your letter to the Templar treasurer. He examines the document, checks the seal, and reads the coded inscription. He may ask you a prearranged question for security, a medieval password of sorts. He then consults a large, leather-bound ledger. After a moment, he nods. He calls for a servant, who returns with a heavy box. The treasurer counts out your money. Not in English silver marks, of course. He gives you the equivalent value in the local currency of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, perhaps bezants or deniers. The Templars, being an international organization, have become experts in currency exchange. They might take a small fee for this service, sometimes framed as a donation, or build their profit into the exchange rate. The church officially frowned upon usury, the lending of money at interest, so the Templars had to be creative. But the convenience and security they offered were so revolutionary that no one complained. You walk out into the Acre sun, your fortune restored. This system was a stroke of genius, born of necessity. The Templars were uniquely suited to create it. They were an international order, with secure, fortified houses, preceptories, in every major country in Europe and throughout the Holy Land. They had a reputation for being incorruptible. Their monastic vows meant they had no personal interest in stealing the money entrusted to them. They were disciplined, literate, and organized. And, of course, they had the military muscle to protect their assets. In essence, they created the first international banking system. Kings, popes, and nobles began to use them not just for transferring funds, but as a depository for their wealth. King Philip II of France used the Paris Temple as his royal treasury. The Templars became custodians of crown jewels, important treaties, and vast sums of money. The poor fellow soldiers had become the trusted bankers of all of Christendom, a role that would bring them immense power, but also the envy and suspicion of powerful men. Your journey across the medieval world continues. You have seen the Templars as holy warriors on the roads to Jerusalem and as shrewd bankers in their fortified city headquarters. Now, you will see the vast, hidden engine that powered it all. For the next several years, you find yourself traveling not in the Holy Land, but across the green and pleasant landscapes of Western Europe. You ride through the rolling hills of Burgundy, the dense forests of the German lands, and the windswept plains of Castile. And everywhere you go, you are never more than a day or two's ride from a Templar property. Their presence is woven into the very fabric of the European countryside. You begin to understand that their power was not just concentrated in the East. It was built upon a sprawling, continent-wide empire of faith and farmland. You decide to spend a night at one of their preceptories in the French countryside. This is not the imposing Paris Temple, the financial heart of the order, but a more typical rural commandery. As you approach, it resembles the fortified manor you visited to deposit your money, but now you have the chance to see it as a living, breathing community. It is a hive of activity, a microcosm of the medieval world, all functioning with a quiet, disciplined efficiency. The outer walls enclose a large courtyard. On one side, you hear the rhythmic clang of a blacksmith's hammer on an anvil as he forges horseshoes or mends a plowshare. The air carries the warm, comforting smell of baking bread from a communal oven. You see lay brothers, not knights, tending to vegetable gardens and feeding chickens. This preceptory is, first and foremost, a farm, and a highly productive one at that. The Templars were excellent farmers and estate managers. When a great lord donated a tract of land, it was often underdeveloped, marshland, or dense forest. The Templars, with their organized workforce of sergeants and lay brothers, would drain the swamps, clear the forests, and turn the land into profitable agricultural ground. They were innovators, using the latest farming techniques to maximize their yields. They built mills, planted vineyards, and raised vast flocks of sheep. You see the evidence all around you. The fields are well plowed, the livestock is healthy, and the granaries are full. This is not just for their own subsistence. This is business. The grain, wine, and wool produced here will be sold at local markets. The profits, after the preceptory's own needs are met, will be sent up the chain of command. A river of silver flowing steadily eastward to fund the wars in Outremer. You are given a simple but clean room for the night and invited to take your evening meal in the refectory. You eat with the brothers in monastic silence, listening to a reading from the scriptures. The community here is a cross-section of the order. There is the commander, a knight of noble birth, a veteran of the fighting in the East, now tasked with managing this estate in his later years. There are a few other knight brothers, perhaps younger men in training, but the vast majority of the residents are sergeant brothers. These men were not of noble birth and could not become knights, but they were the backbone of the order. They served as squires, administrators, craftsmen, and farmers. They wore black or brown mantles, and though they took the same vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience, their lives were dedicated to the practical work that kept the entire enterprise afloat. In the morning, you wake before dawn to the sound of the chapel bell calling the brothers to matins. The quiet chanting is a reminder that this is, above all, a religious house. Their life is structured around prayer, a constant cycle of devotion that sanctifies their daily labor. After the service, as the sun rises, you see the younger knights in the tilt yard, a training ground within the walls. They practice their horsemanship and weapon skills under the watchful eye of the commander. A quinton, a rotating target on a post, spins as a young knight charges it with his lance. Another pair practices sword and shield drills, the clash of blunted steel echoing in the crisp morning air. This preceptory is not just a farm. It is a recruitment and training depot. Young men who join the order here will learn the skills of war before they are ever sent to the East. They learn to fight not as individuals, but as a unit, a key to the Templars' legendary discipline on the battlefield. This single preceptory is just one node in a vast network. Historians estimate that at their height, the Templars controlled over 800 such properties across Europe, organized into provinces. There was a master of France, a master of England, a master of Aragon, and so on. These masters were powerful figures, reporting directly to the Grand Master in the Holy Land. They managed the order's assets in their region like a modern CEO, overseeing dozens of preceptories, collecting revenues, acquiring new properties, and managing the order's political relationships with local kings and bishops. This international structure allowed them to move money, supplies, and men across borders with an efficiency that no secular kingdom could match. A warhorse bred in Spain could be transported on a Templar-owned ship from a Templar-controlled port to Acre. A surplus of English wool could be sold in Flanders to fund the purchase of timber from the Baltic to fortify a castle in Galilee. It was a logistical marvel, a multinational corporation dedicated to a single, holy purpose. As you ride away from the preceptory, the rhythmic clang of the blacksmith's hammer fading behind you, you have a new appreciation for the white-mantled knights. Their fearsome reputation was not just forged in the heat of battle, but in the quiet, patient, and profitable labor of thousands of brothers on farms just like this one. An unseen empire of faith that stretched all the way to the frontiers of Christendom. You have seen the Templar Empire from the outside, as a pilgrim, a customer, and a guest. But now, you are about to experience it from within. You are a young nobleman, the second son of a minor baron from Poitou. Your prospects in the secular world were slim, but your heart was fired by the stories of the holy warriors and the words of the great Bernard of Clairvaux. You have given away your worldly possessions, cut your hair short, and sworn the sacred vows. You have been accepted into the order as a knight brother. Your new life begins now, within the stone walls of a rural preceptory. And it is a life of relentless, ordered routine. Your day begins in the deep, utter blackness of the night, long before any hint of dawn. The sharp, insistent clang of a bell cuts through your sleep. This is the call to matins, the first of the canonical hours. You don't linger in your bed. Hesitation is a form of sloth, a sin. You share a dormitory with the other brothers, a long, stark room lined with simple beds, a straw-filled mattress, a rough woolen blanket, and perhaps a sheepskin for warmth. The rule is strict. A lamp must be kept burning all night, and you must sleep in your shirt and breeches, so that you may be ready to rise without delay. You pull on your boots and your mantle and join the silent procession of white-robed figures making their way to the chapel. The chapel is cold. The stone floor leaches warmth from the soles of your feet. The only light comes from a few flickering candles on the altar. You take your place in the choir stalls. The chaplain begins the ancient chants, the Latin psalms that monks have sung for centuries. Your voice joins with the others, the sound filling the small, dark space. In these pre-dawn hours, you are not a warrior. You are a monk, your voice raised in prayer for the soul of the world. After matins, there is a brief pause, perhaps for personal prayer or study, before the bell rings again for lauds, the service that greets the rising sun. Only after this, as the first gray light of dawn filters through the narrow chapel windows, does the worldly part of your day begin. You have not eaten yet. The first meal of the day comes later. Your first duty is to your horse. The Templars were a cavalry force, and the bond between a knight and his warhorse was sacred. You head to the stables, the air thick with the warm, earthy smell of horses and hay. The rule allows each knight 3 horses, typically a destrier, warhorse, a palfrey, riding horse, and a pack horse, plus a squire, usually a sergeant brother, to assist him. You check your animals, groom them, and ensure their tack is in perfect condition. Your life in battle will depend on the health of your mount and the integrity of your equipment. There is no room for carelessness. After seeing your horses, the morning is dedicated to the craft of war. You spend hours in the tilt yard, the training ground you once observed as a guest. Under the stern gaze of the preceptory's commander, you and your fellow knights practice endlessly. You charge the quinton with your heavy lance, learning to keep your seat and aim true. You practice swordplay, your arms aching from the weight of your shield and the effort of delivering controlled, powerful blows. This is not the flamboyant jousting of secular tournaments, which the rule forbids as a dangerous vanity. This is brutal, practical training for the chaos of a real battlefield. You learn to fight as a unit, to respond instantly to commands, to form the disciplined, unstoppable charge that is becoming the Templars' trademark. Around midday, the bell calls you from your training. This is the hour of sext, another short service of psalms, followed by the first meal of the day. You file into the refectory and wash your hands at a stone basin. You take your seat at the long wooden tables in strict silence. The rule dictates that two brothers share a single bowl, a constant reminder of humility and brotherhood. The food is simple but plentiful. The rule allows meat 3 times a week. On other days, you might have a thick stew of vegetables and grains, cheese, and bread. You drink water, or perhaps a weak, sour wine diluted with water. As you eat, one of the brothers stands at a lectern and reads from the Bible or the lives of the saints. Conversation is forbidden. The only sounds are the scraping of spoons on wooden bowls and the reader's steady voice. The afternoon brings more duties. You might be tasked with inspecting the preceptory's armory, ensuring every sword is sharp, every mail coif free of rust. You might have lessons in strategy and tactics from the commander, or you may be assigned more mundane work alongside the sergeant brothers, repairing a fence or helping to tally the accounts of the estate. The rule makes it clear: idleness is the enemy of the soul. Every hour of the day must be filled with prayer or useful work. As evening approaches, the cycle of prayer resumes. None, then vespers as the sun begins to set. The second meal of the day follows, another silent, simple affair. After supper, there may be a meeting in the chapter house, where the commander discusses the day's business or where brothers must publicly confess any infraction of the rule. Discipline is strict. A brother who disobeys an order or is found with a personal possession might be flogged or sentenced to eat on the floor for a week. The final service of the day is Compline, a gentle, quiet service to end the day. Then, in silence, you and your brothers return to the dormitory. You are in your bed as darkness falls. The bell that woke you in the blackness of night has now released you to a few hours of precious sleep before it rings again, and the entire, unvarying cycle begins once more. It is a hard, repetitive, and deeply ordered life, designed to strip away your old self and forge you into something new, a perfect instrument of God's will. Years of your life have been spent in the disciplined rhythm of the preceptory in Poitou. You have prayed, trained, and worked, your body and spirit honed by the strictures of the rule. Now, the summons has come. You are being sent to the place where your order was born, the reason for its existence, the Holy Land, or as the Franks who live there call it, Outremer, the land beyond the sea. After a long and perilous sea voyage from Marseille, your ship docks at the port of Acre. The moment you step ashore, your senses are overwhelmed. The ordered, green, and damp world of France is gone, replaced by a blast of dry, searing heat. The light is so bright it makes you squint, reflecting off the white stone of the city. The air is a thick tapestry of unfamiliar smells, exotic spices, roasting meat, camel dung, and the salt of the sea. This is the front line. This is the crucible. You do not remain in the relative comfort of the Templar headquarters in Acre for long. You and a small contingent of other newly arrived brothers are assigned to a garrison. Your destination is a castle deep in the interior, perhaps a fortress like Chastel Blanc in the county of Tripoli, perched on a high hill overlooking a crucial pass. The journey inland is a stark lesson in the realities of life in Outremer. You ride in a tight column, scouts ranging ahead and to the flanks. The landscape is rocky, arid, and bleached by the sun. The scattered villages you pass are inhabited not by French or Latin-speaking peasants, but by local Christians of various sects, or by Muslims and Druze who watch your armed party pass with unreadable expressions. You are acutely aware that you are a small, foreign presence in an ancient land that is not your own. The castle, when you finally see it, is a breathtaking and intimidating sight. It is not a sprawling, comfortable residence like the castles of your homeland. It is a work of pure military function, a brutalist masterpiece of stone and strategy. Its thick, high walls seem to grow organically from the rocky hilltop. There are few windows, only narrow arrow slits. The entire structure is designed for one purpose: to withstand a siege. You ride up the winding path to the gatehouse, and the heavy, iron-banded gates creak open to admit you. Inside, the world shrinks to a space of sun-baked stone and deep shadow. The courtyard is dusty and crowded with the essentials of military life: a forge, a well, stables, and storerooms. This will be your home and your entire world for the foreseeable future. Life in a Crusader castle is even more austere than life in the preceptory. The routine of prayer remains the unshakable framework of your day, a vital source of spiritual discipline in a place of constant tension. But the agricultural work is gone, replaced by the relentless duties of a soldier on active watch. Your new life is governed by the watchtower and the wall walk. You are assigned shifts on the battlements, standing for hours under the relentless sun, your mail coif heating up like an oven. You scan the horizon, the rolling hills and distant valleys, looking for any sign of a threat, a plume of dust that might signify a raiding party, a glint of sun on steel. The heat is a physical presence, shimmering off the stones, making the landscape waver in the distance. Water is strictly rationed, drawn from the castle's deep cisterns, and it is more precious than wine. The camaraderie you shared with your brothers in France deepens here into a vital, life-or-death interdependence. You live in close quarters, sleeping in the same stone-vaulted rooms, eating the same simple, repetitive meals: hardtack biscuits, salted meat, olives, and cheese. There is no room for personal disputes. The man you stand beside on the wall is the man who will guard your back if the alarm is ever raised. The commander of the castle is an absolute authority, his orders followed without question. He is a veteran, his face a leathery mask, his eyes accustomed to judging the heat haze and the subtle signs of danger in the land. When you are not on watch, you are on patrol. A small squadron of you, perhaps 10 or 12 knights and their squires, will ride out from the castle at dawn. You patrol the surrounding territory, showing the flag, protecting local Christian villages, escorting merchant caravans, and gathering intelligence. These patrols are exercises in extreme tension. Every rocky outcrop, every narrow ravine, is a potential ambush site. You ride in silence, communicating with hand signals, your hand never far from the hilt of your sword. You learn to read the landscape like a book, to notice a flock of birds suddenly taking flight, a sign that something has disturbed them below. You are the intruders here, and you are constantly being watched by unseen eyes. There are long periods of boredom, of a monotonous, watchful waiting that can wear down the spirit as much as any battle. You learn to cope with the isolation, the heat, the flies, and the constant, low-level fear. But this is why you are here. The entire logistical network of the Order in Europe, all those farms, mills, and financial offices, exists to support you. A single knight in a white mantle, standing on this sun-blasted wall. You are the tip of the spear, the physical embodiment of the Order's sacred mission. The pilgrim road you imagined yourself on all those years ago is safe only because castles like this one stand as silent, vigilant sentinels, projecting a fragile bubble of Christian power into a hostile land. In this crucible, your faith is either burned away to nothing or forged into something as hard and resilient as the stone of the castle walls. The long, watchful peace of the garrison has been broken. A great army has been assembled. Perhaps it is the army of the King of Jerusalem himself, marching to relieve a besieged fortress or to meet a Saracen invasion force in open battle. For weeks, you have been on the march, a river of steel flowing slowly through the arid landscape. The sun is a merciless hammer beating down on your helmet. Dust, kicked up by thousands of whooping horses and trudging infantry, coats everything, filling your nostrils and grating between your teeth. The army is a fractious, colorful beast. There are the secular knights of the kingdom, their banners bright with the heraldry of their families, their squires laughing and boasting. There are the crimson-robed knights of the rival Hospitaller Order and various other contingents. But you and your Templar brothers are a distinct and somber presence within this host. You ride in a disciplined, compact squadron, your white mantles, though now stained with the dust and sweat of the campaign, a stark contrast to the riot of color around you. You do not engage in the easy chatter of the other knights. The rule forbids idle talk on the march. You ride in a watchful silence, conserving your energy and that of your horse. Your commander, the marshal of the order, rides at the head of your column. His authority is absolute. While the king or a great baron may be the nominal commander-in-chief of the army, the Templar contingent obeys only its own officers. This is a frequent source of friction, but it is the bedrock of your effectiveness. The secular lords are notoriously impetuous, prone to charging off in pursuit of personal glory. You are taught to fight not as individuals, but as a single, unified weapon. The day of battle dawns. The enemy is before you, a vast army of Saracen horsemen, their lines stretching across the plain. The air is filled with the sound of their war drums, a deep, rhythmic throbbing that seems to vibrate in your very bones, and the high, ululating cries of their horns. Their light cavalry, skilled horse archers, dart forward, peppering your lines with arrows. The infantry forms a shield wall, the foot soldiers bracing themselves for the coming storm. The secular knights beside you are restless, their horses prancing nervously. They are eager to charge, to win renown. But you wait. Your commander holds you back. The marshal rides along the front of your formation, his expression calm, his orders clear. Hold the line. Wait for the signal. This is the hardest part. You must endure the enemy's arrows, the psychological pressure of their taunts and their thundering drums, without breaking formation. You see men fall. You hear the thud of arrows striking shields, but you do not move. You trust in your heavy armor, your large kite shield, and the discipline that has been drilled into you since you were a novice. You keep your eyes fixed on the marshal's banner, the famous black and white bowcent, waiting for it to dip, the signal to advance. You are a coiled spring, a storm held in check. This patience, this iron control, is what separates the Templars from all other knights. Then, the moment comes. The enemy, emboldened by your apparent passivity, has advanced too close. Their lines are becoming disordered. The marshal sees his opportunity. His voice rings out, clear and sharp above the din. The bowcent dips, and the world explodes into motion. You lower your heavy lance, couching it under your arm, its 12-foot length a steel-tipped extension of your will. You spur your great destrier forward, a beast bred and trained for this single, cataclysmic moment. You are not charging alone. You are one part of a solid wall of horse, steel, and faith, moving as one. The ground begins to tremble. The slow trot becomes a canter, then a full, thunderous gallop. The sound of hundreds of heavy war horses charging together is not a sound of hoofbeats. It is a deep, terrifying roar like an earthquake. You shout your war cry, for Christ and the temple, your voice joining a single, deafening chorus. The experience of the charge is a sensory overload. The wind screams past your helmet. The enemy line, which seemed so distant, rushes toward you with terrifying speed. You see the faces of individual men, their eyes wide with fear. The disciplined horse archers, so effective at a distance, are helpless before this avalanche of heavy cavalry. They cannot get out of the way fast enough. The impact is shattering. Your lance strikes a shield, the shock of it jolting up your arm, and the spearhead punches through wood and mail and flesh. The enemy line simply disintegrates. It is not a fight. It is a collision. Horses and men go down in a chaotic tangle. Your lance, its work done, is discarded. You draw your sword, the familiar weight of comfort in your hand. Now the melee begins, a brutal, close-quarter struggle. This is where your years of training in the tilt yard pay off. You are surrounded, but you are not alone. Your Templar brothers are all around you, their white mantles a beacon in the chaos. You fight back to back, guarding each other's flanks, a small, disciplined island in a swirling sea of violence. You are trained never to retreat, never to break formation, and never to surrender unless the odds are overwhelming and the bow scent has fallen. Your belief is absolute. If you fall, you are a martyr, your place in heaven assured. This conviction makes you fearless, a terrifying opponent for men who fight only for plunder or for a mortal lord. You are the shock troops of the Crusader army, the weapon of last resort, the force that can turn the tide of a desperate battle. And today, as the enemy begins to break and flee before your relentless advance, you understand why the sight of your white mantles on the horizon strikes fear into the hearts of your foes. You are a master of the battlefield. The heat of battle fades, replaced by the tense, intricate dance of politics. You are no longer a simple knight in the line of charge. You are now a seasoned commander, a preceptor of a major fortress. And you find yourself spending less time in the tilt yard and more time in council chambers, navigating the treacherous currents of power in the kingdom of Jerusalem. You've learned that the Saracens are not the only threat you face. Sometimes, the most complicated challenges come from your fellow Christians, men who fight under the same cross but march to the beat of a different drum. Your greatest rivals are, paradoxically, the men most like you, the Knights of the Hospital of St. John of Jerusalem, known to all as the Hospitallers. You see them often, in the streets of Acre, at the royal court in Jerusalem, and on the field of battle. Their presence is a constant. At first glance, they seem almost a mirror image of your own order. They are warrior monks, bound by vows of poverty, chastity, and obedience. They are renowned for their courage and are a vital part of the kingdom's defense. But you are trained to notice the differences, and they are profound. Their origins are not in warfare, but in charity. They began as a brotherhood running a hospital in Jerusalem to care for sick and impoverished pilgrims, long before the First Crusade. Their charitable mission has never ceased. Their great hospitals in Jerusalem and Acre are marvels of medical care, open to all, regardless of faith or origin. This dual role of healer and warrior gives them a different character, a different public image. Their appearance is a stark contrast to your own. While you wear the white mantle of purity, they are cloaked in black, a symbol of humility and their service to the poor and sick. Later, on the battlefield, they will adopt a red surcoat with a white cross, but their black robes of state are their most distinctive feature. This visual difference is a constant, public reminder of your separate identities. And beneath the surface, a fierce rivalry simmers. You are the two pillars supporting the Crusader states, and you are constantly jostling for position, competing for the same resources. When a pious noble in Europe decides to donate land to a military order, he must choose the Templars or the Hospitallers. When a young knight decides to dedicate his life to God and the defense of the Holy Land, which mantle will he choose? This competition is relentless, playing out in the courts of every European monarch and in the council chambers of the Pope himself. The rivalry extends to property and privilege. Both your orders have amassed huge estates across Europe and within Outremer itself. Sometimes, the boundaries of these properties are unclear, leading to bitter legal disputes that can drag on for years. You both have been granted exemptions from paying tithes to local bishops and are answerable only to the Pope. This extraordinary privilege makes you powerful and independent, but it also makes you the subject of intense jealousy from the secular clergy and the feudal lords. You and the Hospitallers are like two great rival corporations, each with its own brand, its own assets, and its own fiercely loyal members on occasion. This simmering rivalry has boiled over into something uglier. You've heard the stories from the old veterans, tales of street brawls between brothers of the two orders in the port cities of Acre or Tyre. More seriously, your strategic disagreements have sometimes led to disaster for the kingdom. In one infamous campaign, the Templar Grand Master refused to support an invasion of Egypt favored by the king and the Hospitallers, a decision that led to accusations of treachery. Historians still debate the wisdom of that choice, but it highlights the dangerous disunity that plagued the Crusader leadership. The Templars, the Hospitallers, and the secular barons often pursued their own agendas, forgetting that their common enemy was poised to exploit any division. Yet, you are not always enemies. When a major Saracen army crosses the border, when the very existence of the kingdom is at stake, the rivalry is set aside. You have stood on the battlefield and seen the black banner of the Hospitallers holding the left flank while your own bow-scent flies on the right. In those moments of shared, existential peril, you are brothers in arms, if not in order. You know you can rely on their discipline and courage, just as they can rely on yours. The shared experience of combat, of watching friends fall, forges a bond of mutual respect that transcends the political squabbles. There is also a third, newer order on the scene, the Teutonic Knights. Instantly recognizable in their white mantles adorned with a stark black cross, they are composed almost entirely of German knights. For now, they are a smaller presence in the Holy Land, but their power is growing, and they add another complex piece to the political puzzle. Your relationship with the secular lords and the King of Jerusalem is equally fraught. In the early days, you were the king's loyal servants. But now, the Templar Order is an international superpower. Your Grand Master is a figure of immense authority, who commands more men and more money than many European kings. You are, in effect, a state within a state. You control your own castles, your own finances, and your own foreign policy, often making treaties with Muslim powers without the king's consent. This independence is a source of constant friction. The kings and barons of Jerusalem, who are perpetually short of men and money, resent your vast wealth and your exemption from their authority. They see you as arrogant and secretive, but they cannot afford to alienate you. They depend utterly on your military strength. Without the Templars and the Hospitallers, the kingdom would collapse in a matter of months. And so, a delicate, often resentful, balance is maintained, a web of alliances, rivalries, and dependencies as complex and dangerous as any battlefield. The world has changed. The golden age of the Crusader states is a distant memory. It is the year 1291. Jerusalem fell decades ago, and the Frankish kingdom has been reduced to a fragile coastal strip, a few fortified cities clinging precariously to the edge of the sea. You are no longer a young knight full of righteous certainty, nor a powerful commander navigating the subtleties of diplomacy. You are an old man, your hair and beard now as white as your mantle. You are in Acre, the last great Christian bastion in the Holy Land. And the city is dying. For over a month, the city has been besieged by the vast, seemingly numberless army of the Mamluk Sultan, Al-Ashraf Khalil. The horizon to the east is a forest of siege towers and the brightly colored tents of the enemy. The air, day and night, is never silent. It is filled with the relentless, percussive thud of mangonels and trebuchets, massive siege engines that hurl enormous stones against the city's ancient walls. The impacts shake the very ground, and with each one, another piece of the city's defenses crumbles to dust. The constant noise is a weapon in itself, designed to break the spirit as much as the stone. The sky is often hazy with the smoke of fires started by flaming projectiles, and the smell of fear, smoke. And death is a permanent pall over the city. You stand on the accursed tower, one of the key defensive points on the outer wall, and look down at the chaos within the city. Acre is swollen with refugees who have fled the fall of other towns. The streets are a desperate, teeming mass of humanity. Your primary duty is the defense of the walls, but the city itself is collapsing from within. Food is scarce, clean water scarcer, and morale is a flickering candle in a hurricane. Yet you fight on. The defense of the city is in the hands of the military orders. The Templars, the Hospitallers, the Teutonic Knights. All the old rivalries are forgotten now, subsumed by the desperate struggle for survival. You fight side by side, your white mantles next to the red surcoats of the Hospitallers. A united front at the end of the world, the Grand Master of your order, Guillaume de Beaujeu, is the heart and soul of the defense. He is everywhere, a tireless, inspiring presence on the walls, directing repairs, encouraging the men, and leading counterattacks. He is a shrewd diplomat who had tried for years to maintain a truce with the Mamluks, but now that war has come, he is a warrior once more. You see him directing the defense of a breach, his white mantle making him an obvious target, his courage absolute. The end comes on the 18th of May. After weeks of bombardment, a major section of the wall has been breached. The Mamluk army pours into the city like a flood. The fighting in the narrow streets is brutal and confusing. It is a desperate, house-to-house struggle with no hope of victory, only the chance to sell your life dearly. You and your surviving brothers are forced to fall back, retreating through the carnage towards the sea. Your destination is the Templar compound, a massive, fortified quarter on the southwestern tip of the city, its walls rising directly from the waves. It is a fortress within a fortress, the last redoubt. You manage to fight your way through the chaos and pass through the gates of the temple just before they are slammed shut. Inside, a scene of organized desperation is unfolding. Thousands of civilians have taken refuge here, hoping the Templars' legendary strength can hold back the tide. The Knights are helping women and children onto the few remaining Templar ships anchored in the harbor, a desperate, small-scale evacuation. But for most, there is no escape. The Mamluk forces surround the compound, and the siege begins anew. During the street fighting, a terrible blow had fallen. The Grand Master, Guillaume de Beaujeu, was struck down by a Saracen arrow. His men carried him back to the temple, and as he lay dying, they told him the city was lost. His last words, according to the chroniclers, were a denial born of a lifetime of fighting. "I am not dying, I am only wounded." But he was gone, and with him, the last hope of a coordinated defense. The command of the surviving Templars falls to the Marshal, Peter de Severy. He continues the hopeless defense of the temple compound for several more days. The Mamluks bring up their siege engines and begin to pound the walls of your last sanctuary. They offer terms: safe passage to Cyprus for the remaining defenders if they surrender the fortress. The Marshal agrees, but when the Mamluk emirs and their soldiers enter the compound, the truce breaks down. Seeing the Christian women and children being assaulted, the Templars, in a final act of fury and defiance, turn on the Mamluks, kill them, and barricade the gates once more. Now there is no hope of mercy. The Mamluks begin to mine the walls of the great tower. You and the last handful of defenders know the end is near. You hear the sounds of the sappers digging beneath you. On the 28th of May, 10 days after the city first fell, the final assault began. As the Mamluk soldiers storm the breaches and swarm up the tower, its foundations, weakened by the mines, finally give way. With a terrible, grinding roar, the entire structure collapses, taking the last Templar defenders and the Mamluk attackers with it into a single, dusty tomb. You are not in that tower. You were one of the few who managed to escape on a ship with the Order's treasurer, carrying the last of the Templars' treasure and, more importantly, the seed of its survival. As your ship pulls away from the burning city, you look back at the smoke and ruin that was once the capital of Christian Outremer. 200 years of crusading history have ended in this single, catastrophic defeat. The Templars were created to protect the Holy Land. Now the Holy Land is lost, and for the first time in its history, your order is without a purpose. The smoke from the fires of Acre has long since cleared from the sky, but a different kind of shadow is now falling over your order. The year is 1306. 15 years have passed since the fall of the Holy Land. You are old now, one of the last of a generation that fought in Outremer. After the disaster, the Order established its new headquarters on the island of Cyprus, but much of its administrative and financial heart has always been in Europe, particularly in Paris. You now reside in the Paris Temple, a vast and magnificent fortified complex that serves as the treasury of France and the nerve center of your Order's European operations. It is a place of immense power and wealth, but it no longer feels like a sanctuary. It feels like a gilded cage. The loss of Acre was more than a military defeat. It was a profound identity crisis. For nearly 2 centuries, your purpose was clear, your mission sanctified, to defend the Holy Land. Now that the Holy Land is lost, you are a solution without a problem, an army with no war to fight. You and your brothers spend your days managing your vast estates, acting as bankers, and planning for a new crusade that, in your heart, you know will likely never come. The world has moved on. The crusading ideal is fading, replaced by the machinations of powerful new nation-states. And no state is more powerful or more centralized than France, ruled by its enigmatic and formidable king, Philip IV. They call him Le Bel, Philip the Fair, on account of his handsome, emotionless face. You have seen him at court, a tall, imposing, and eerily still figure. He is famously pious, attending Mass daily, but beneath the veneer of sanctity, you sense a will of cold iron. Philip has a vision for France, a modern, centralized kingdom, with all power flowing directly from the throne. He has humbled the great feudal lords and even challenged the authority of the papacy itself. But his ambitions are expensive. He has debased the currency, expelled the Jews and the Lombard bankers to seize their assets, and levied crippling taxes on the clergy. He is a king who is perpetually, desperately, in need of money. And every day, as he looks out from his palace on the Isle de la Cite, he sees your headquarters, the Paris Temple, a fortress of unimaginable wealth, belonging to an order that is answerable only to the Pope, an order whose purpose is now unclear. A chill wind of rumor and insinuation begins to blow through the courts of Europe, and its source seems to be the circle of ministers and lawyers who surround King Philip. Men like the ruthless Guillaume de Nogaret, Philip's chief agent, begin to quietly build a case against you. You start to hear the whispers in the taverns and marketplaces. People say the Templars are arrogant, that their pride led to the loss of the Holy Land. They say you are greedy, hoarding your immense wealth instead of using it for Christendom. They murmur that you are secretive, that no one truly knows what goes on behind the closed doors of your chapter meetings. The old respect and awe that your white mantle once inspired is slowly curdling into suspicion and envy. The stories become wilder, more sinister. Disgruntled former members of the order, men who were expelled for theft or indiscipline, are sought out by the king's agents. They are offered pardons or rewards in exchange for testimony, and they tell tales. dark tales of blasphemous rituals during the secret initiation ceremony. They claim that new recruits are forced to deny Christ, to spit upon the crucifix, to exchange obscene kisses. They speak of idol worship, of a mysterious bearded head called Baphomet. To you, who have been through the simple, pious ceremony, these accusations are ludicrous, the bitter fantasies of disgraced men. But in an age of deep piety and superstition, they are potent poison. The political situation is uniquely perilous. The Pope, Clement V, should be your ultimate protector. The order is his direct responsibility. But Clement is a Frenchman, the former Archbishop of Bordeaux, and he owes his election to the papacy in large part to the influence of King Philip. He has even moved the papal court from the chaos of Rome to Avignon in southern France, a move that places him squarely within Philip's sphere of influence. You can imagine the immense pressure the king is placing on the Pope. Philip presents himself not as a greedy monarch seeking to plunder your assets, but as a devout king determined to root out a heresy that threatens the very soul of Christendom. The Pope is caught in an impossible position. He is a cautious, legalistic man. He suggests a merger between the Templars and the Hospitallers, a way to reform both orders and give them a renewed purpose. Jacques de Molay, your current Grand Master, an aging veteran of the wars in the East, vehemently rejects this idea. He travels from Cyprus to France in 1307 to meet with the Pope and the King to discuss plans for a new crusade and to answer the vague rumors he has been hearing. De Molay is a brave soldier, but perhaps not the most astute politician. He seems unable to grasp the gravity of the danger he is in. He admits to the Pope that there have been some minor irregularities in the initiation ceremony that he is working to reform, a small admission that Philip's agents will later twist into a confession of guilt. He walks into the spider's web, seemingly unaware of the threads closing in around him. You watch him come and go from the temple, a proud old warrior, confident in the righteousness of his order and the protection of the Pope, while the king's lawyers sharpen their knives in the shadows. The air grows heavy with a sense of foreboding. Something terrible is about to happen. The bell for matins has already rung, its familiar call echoing through the stone corridors of the Paris temple while the city outside still sleeps. It is a Friday, the 13th day of October in the year of our Lord, 1307. You stand in the chapel, the pre-dawn chill seeping into your bones, your voice joining the rhythmic Latin chant. The flame of the altar candles dances in the slight draft. Everything is as it has always been. The day has begun with prayer, as has every day of your life since you took your vows. After the service, you will go about your duties, perhaps reviewing accounts in the treasury, inspecting the armory, or overseeing the work of the lay brothers. The Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay, is here in the temple, having attended the funeral of the king's sister-in-law just yesterday, an honored guest. There is no hint of danger. The order feels as solid and eternal as the stone walls that surround you. The first sign that something is wrong is a sound from the outside, a sound that does not belong to the gentle waking of the city. It is a heavy, rhythmic banging on the main gate, loud and insistent. Then shouting, not the call of a market vendor, but the sharp, authoritative bark of soldiers' commands. You and your brothers exchange uneasy glances in the flickering candlelight of the dormitory. A sense of confusion ripples through the community. Are they under attack? Here, in the heart of Paris? It seems impossible. The commander of the temple goes to the gate, demanding to know who seeks entry with such aggression. The reply is chilling. It is the king's men, armed with a royal warrant. The gates are opened. They would not have held for long against a determined assault, and to resist the king's authority directly is unthinkable. A flood of armed men pours into the courtyard. These are not common soldiers. They are led by royal officials, men in sober robes, their faces grim and determined. In their hands, they hold scrolls of parchment bearing the royal seal. At their head is the king's man himself, Guillaume de Nogaret. There is no negotiation, no explanation. You are roused from your cells and dormitories, herded into the main hall like common sheep. The soldiers are rough, efficient. They seem to have detailed plans of the entire complex. The shock is profound, numbing. You are a knight of the temple, a member of a holy order, answerable only to the Pope. Your person is sacred, your headquarters a sanctuary. Secular authorities have no jurisdiction here. And yet, here they are. You see Jacques de Molay, his face a mask of disbelief and outrage, being confronted by Nogaret. The Grand Master, a man who has commanded armies and conversed with kings, is treated with no more respect than the youngest novice. He and all the brothers present are informed that they are under arrest by order of the king and the authority of the Grand Inquisitor of France. The charge is heresy, heresy. The word hangs in the air, unbelievable, obscene. It is the most terrible accusation that can be leveled against a Christian. You look at the faces of your brothers, men you have lived and prayed with for decades, men who have shed their blood in the Holy Land. You see confusion, fear, but above all, a deep, wounding bewilderment. The soldiers move through the temple, disarming you. Your sword, which you have carried in the service of Christ, is taken from your belt. Your white mantle, the symbol of your purity and your vows, is ripped from your shoulders. Your hands are bound behind your back with coarse rope. The humiliation is a physical blow, as stunning as any strike from a mace. You soon learn the terrifying scale of the operation. This is not just happening in Paris. At this very same hour, at dawn on this Friday the 13th, the same scene is being repeated at every single Templar preceptory, farm, and chapel in the entire Kingdom of France. Months ago, King Philip had sent out secret, sealed orders to all of his seneschals, bailiffs, and royal officials across the land. The instructions were precise. They were to be opened everywhere at the same time on the appointed day. They contained the arrest warrants and a list of the charges against you. It was a perfectly coordinated national police action, an unprecedented move of stunning efficiency and secrecy. No one had suspected a thing. The Templar Order in France, with its thousands of members and its vast network of properties, has been decapitated and imprisoned in a single morning. You are let out of your home, the Paris Temple, and paraded through the waking streets of the city. People come to their windows and doors to stare at the procession of bound and shamed knights. Their faces are a mixture of shock and morbid curiosity. The whispers you once ignored have done their work. The king's propaganda has laid the groundwork. To many of these onlookers, you are not holy warriors being unjustly arrested. You are a nest of heretics finally being brought to justice. You are taken to a royal prison, perhaps the Louvre or the dungeons of the Châtelet, and thrown into a cold, dark cell. The door slams shut, the heavy bolts scraping home, and you are left in the darkness, alone with your fear and your disbelief. The world has been turned upside down. The order that was your life, your family, your entire identity, has been shattered in a few short hours. This day, Friday the 13th, would be remembered for centuries to come as a day of profound ill omen. For you, it is simply the beginning of a nightmare from which you will not wake. The darkness of your cell is absolute. A thick, palpable blackness broken only by the thin sliver of light under the heavy oak door. The air is cold and damp, smelling of mold, stale straw, and human misery. Time loses its meaning, measured only by the meager ration of bread and water pushed through a slot in the door. The proud, ordered life of the temple is a distant dream. This is your new reality, a world of stone, darkness, and the gnawing ache of hunger. You are no longer a knight. You are a prisoner, a suspected heretic, and your trial is about to begin. One day, The bolts are drawn back, and you are dragged from your cell, your eyes aching in the sudden torchlight. You are brought to an interrogation chamber. It is not a grand courtroom, but a small, grim room. Seated at a table are several men, robed inquisitors from the Dominican order, their faces impassive, and a royal official, overseeing the proceedings for the king. A scribe sits to the side, his quill poised over a sheet of parchment, ready to record every word. The air is thick with the smell of sweat and fear. In the corner of the room, you see the instruments. The sight of them makes your stomach clench. The wooden frame of the rack, the brazier with its glowing coals, the various iron implements whose purpose you can only guess at. Their presence is a silent, powerful argument. You are forced into a chair. The questions begin. They are relentless, repetitive, and leading. Did you deny Jesus Christ 3 times during your initiation? Did you spit upon an image of the crucifix? Did you worship an idol, a bearded head known as Baphomet? Did you engage in obscene kisses with your brothers? You deny it all. You speak of your vows, your service in the Holy Land, your faith in God. Your denials are met with cold indifference. The inquisitor explains, in a calm, almost gentle voice, that your soul is in grave peril. He is not here to punish you, he says, but to save you. A confession is the only path to repentance and absolution. Stubbornness will only lead to pain in this world and eternal damnation in the next. When you continue to profess your innocence, they give a nod to the men in the corner. The methods of the Inquisition are designed to break the body to save the soul. What follows is a blur of pain and terror. Adhering to the gentle nature of our channel, we will not dwell on the specifics. It is enough to know that the human body has limits, and these men were experts at pushing a person to those limits and beyond. They use pain not just as a punishment, but as a tool of persuasion. Under the agony, your resolve begins to fracture. Your mind, starved and terrified, becomes a swamp of confusion. The Inquisitor's voice drones on, offering you a way out, a simple yes that will make the torment stop. You are not the only one. Across France, hundreds of your brothers are undergoing the same ordeal. And under the relentless pressure, many of them break. One of the first and most devastating confessions comes from the Grand Master himself, Jacques de Molay. Old, proud, and likely terrified for his brothers, he is subjected to intense pressure from the king's men. He confesses to some of the charges, including the denial of Christ and spitting on the cross. He would later claim that he only confessed to save himself from the agony of torture. But his confession is a catastrophic blow. If the Grand Master himself admits guilt, how can the order be innocent? His words are used as a hammer to break the will of other, more resilient knights. Your own Grand Master has confessed, the Inquisitors would say. Are you more righteous than he? The confessions, extracted under duress, are remarkably similar. Knights from Normandy to Provence, who have never met, admit to the same bizarre rituals in almost identical language. This uniformity is not proof of a widespread conspiracy. It is proof of the leading questions they were asked and the answers they were fed to make the pain stop. The scribes record it all, the partial truths, the desperate lies, the incoherent ramblings of broken men. A mountain of damning evidence, all of it manufactured through suffering, is being compiled. Pope Clement V, hearing of the mass arrests and the use of torture, is alarmed. This is his jurisdiction, not the king's. He suspends the inquisitorial proceedings and sends his own cardinals to investigate. For a brief moment, there is a glimmer of hope. You and other Templars are brought before the papal commissioners. Away from the king's torturers, many knights find their courage again. Hundreds of them, including Jacques de Molay, retract their confessions. They state that they confessed only out of fear of torture and that the charges are entirely false. One knight dramatically bares his torso to the commissioners, showing them the horrific scars left by the fire. He tells them he would confess to anything, even to killing God himself, if he were subjected to that again. This wave of retractions creates a serious problem for King Philip. His case, built on forced confessions, is starting to crumble. He needs to reassert his authority and terrorize the Templars back into silence. He declares that all those who retract their confessions are relapsed heretics. The punishment for a relapsed heretic is death. In May of 1310, in a field outside of Paris, 54 Templar Knights who had maintained their innocence and retracted their confessions were brought forth. They are bound to stakes and, as a horrifying warning to their brothers, they are slowly burned to death. As the flames lick at their feet, they continue to cry out that the order is pure and holy. Their voice is a testament to a courage that even fire could not consume. After that terrible day, the retractions stop. The trial continues, but its outcome is no longer in any doubt. The choice is no longer between guilt and innocence, but between a false confession and a horrific death. The end of the order comes not with the clash of steel, but with the scratch of a quill on parchment. You are not in a dungeon or a courtroom, but you can feel the final, inexorable turning of the screw. In 1312, Pope Clement V convened a great church council in the city of Vienne. King Philip of France arrives with a military escort, a not-so-subtle show of force to ensure the assembled bishops and cardinals vote the correct way. The Pope is still in a difficult position. The trials have been a legal mess. Outside of France, in places like Spain, Portugal, and Germany, where local rulers were not so invested in the outcome, the Templars have been largely found innocent. To declare the entire order heretical would be a stain on the Church and an admission that it had supported heretics for nearly 2 centuries. So, Clement engineers a compromise, a masterpiece of legalistic maneuvering. He issues a papal bull, a formal decree called Vox in Excelso. In it, he states that while the guilt of the order as a whole has not been proven, the scandal surrounding it is so great and the reputation of the Templars so tarnished that it can no longer function effectively. Therefore, for the good of the Church and to avoid further scandal, he is not condemning the order, but officially dissolving it. He suppresses the Knights Templar by an inviolable and perpetual decree. It is a quiet, bureaucratic end to the most celebrated fighting force in Christendom. Their property is to be transferred to their old rivals, the Hospitallers. King Philip, however, presents the Pope with an enormous bill for the costs of the investigation and trials, ensuring a vast portion of the Templars' French assets flows directly into his own empty coffers. The king has won. The story, however, has one final, fiery postscript. 2 years have passed. It is now March of 1314. For 7 long years, Jacques de Molay and 3 other high-ranking Templar leaders have been held in a royal prison. They are the last embers of a fire that has been all but extinguished. On a spring afternoon, they are led out onto a specially constructed scaffold erected in the public square in front of the magnificent, half-built Cathedral of Notre Dame. A huge crowd has gathered. You find yourself among them, pushed and jostled by the curious onlookers. The purpose of this spectacle is to bring the affair to a close. Papal legates are present to read the final judgment. The 4 men, having confessed to heresy, are to be sentenced to perpetual imprisonment. The sentence is read: a lifetime in a stone cell. For the 2 lesser leaders, it is the end. But for Jacques de Molay, the old Grand Master, something finally snaps. Perhaps it is the sight of the crowd, the finality of the words, or simply the last surge of a warrior's pride. As the cardinals finish speaking, his voice, cracked from disuse but filled with a sudden, astonishing power, rings out across the square. He retracts it all. He declares that his confession was a lie, forced from him by the pain of torture and the weakness of his flesh. "I think it is right," he proclaims, "that at this last moment of my life, I should expose all the iniquity of falsehood and make the truth triumph." He declares, for all to hear, that the order is pure and holy, and that their only crime was their loyalty to the faith. Beside him, another leader, Geoffrey de Charny, finds his courage and joins his Grand Master, shouting his own innocence. The square erupts in a hubbub. The papal legates are stunned into silence. King Philip, who is likely nearby, is furious. This public defiance has ruined his carefully staged conclusion. His response is swift and brutal. De Molay and de Charny are not returned to their cells. By retracting their confessions, they have declared themselves relapsed heretics. The punishment is automatic and requires no further trial. The king, bypassing the church authorities, orders them to be executed immediately. As dusk settles over Paris, you follow the crowd to a small island in the middle of the river Seine, the Isle de Javios. A pyre has been hastily constructed. The two old knights are brought forth. They are stripped of their outer garments and tied to the stake. Jacques de Molay, it is said, asks to have his hands untied so he can die in an attitude of prayer, his face turned towards the towers of Notre Dame. As the executioners light the pyre, the crowd falls silent. The flames crackle, casting a flickering, orange glow on the river and the faces of the onlookers. The old Grand Master does not scream or cry out. He endures the agony with a courage that silences the entire city. And it is here, in this final, terrible moment, that a legend is born. The chroniclers do not agree on the exact words, and it may be a story that grew in the telling, but it is a powerful one. As the flames consumed him, Jacques de Molay is said to have raised his voice one last time, not in a plea for mercy, but in a summons. He called out to his accusers, Pope Clement and King Philip, and summoned them to appear with him before the judgment seat of God within the year to answer for their crimes. A curse echoing from the flames. Whether he said the words or not, the effect was the same. Pope Clement V died of a wasting illness just 1 month later. King Philip the Fair, still in his prime, died in a hunting accident before the year was out. Coincidence, perhaps, but to the people of France, it was a sign that the last Grand Master had been heard, and that a terrible injustice had been avenged by God himself. The Templar Knights were gone, but their dramatic, fiery end ensured they would never be forgotten. Passing from history into the realm of myth and legend, the flames on the island in the Seine have long since died down, leaving only ashes to be scattered by the Parisian wind. The story of the poor fellow soldiers of Christ and the Temple of Solomon is over. They rose from the dusty roads of the Holy Land, a small band of knights with a simple, noble purpose. For 2 centuries, they were the sword arm of Christendom, their white mantles a symbol of both piety and terror. They became bankers to popes and kings, masters of a vast international corporation of faith and finance. And then, in a few short years, it was all brought to ruin by the greed of a king and the weakness of a pope. As the quiet of the night deepens around you, let the echoes of this long and complex story fade gently away. The clash of swords on a dusty plain, the silent prayers in a cold chapel, the scratching of a quill in a ledger, and the final, defiant cry from a martyr's pyre. These sounds all now belong to the distant past. All that remains is the soft murmur of history, a story to carry you toward your own peaceful rest. The tensions of the battlefield and the anxieties of the courtroom can dissolve now, leaving only stillness. Let your own thoughts drift away like smoke, leaving your mind clear and calm. There are no more battles to be fought tonight, no more trials to endure. There is only the gentle rhythm of your own breathing, a quiet and steady presence in the soft darkness. Sleep now, and may your dreams be peaceful.